I'm going to show you how to scream like Bryan Garris. As a bonus, I'll also talk about what his guitarist Hale does.
I'm a friend, I'm so full of shit. They took a wreck. Get it!
And believe it or not, I'll also talk about how there's a much deeper life lesson that you can learn from their vocals. I'll get to that in a bit. So Knocked Loose's vocals is super interesting because it actually reveals a few blind spots in most people's understandings of metal vocals. Okay, so for starters, for anyone who's new to metal vocals, there's two different main categories of screams: fry screams and false chord screams. Now, these are some pictures of your throat, and to the left, it's a closed throat, and then to the right, it's an open throat. So these white lips right here are called your vocal cords, and when you close and sputter these vocal cords together, these tend to sound wet and gurgly, and these are called fry screams. Now, believe it or not, you can flap these tissues, and it's kind of hard to see from this image here that they can flap, but they absolutely can. And when you do that, these tend to sound crunchy and flappy. These are called false chord screams. Now, for people that have done a bit of digging into metal vocals, there's several different vocal ranges that exist that you can scream in. So if you talk like Elmo and sound like a baby, this is called your head voice. This is called your head voice register. Now if you talk like normal, this is called your chest voice register. So now you have a general awareness of what fry and false chords are and what head voice and chest voice are. I can talk about something a little bit more advanced. So this graph here can explain 90% of the different screams you'll hear in metal. And there are some areas that it doesn't cover, like arytenoids, inhales, and some other things, but for right now, let's keep things simple. So if I wanted to be in my head voice, remember my Mickey Mouse register, and do a fry scream, remember, think wet and gurgly, then I would be around here in this quadrant, and I would sound kind of like this. Now, if I wanted to be in my chest voice, remember my talking register, hey, 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 and do a false chord scream, remember, think crunchy and flappy, I would be around here and sound like this. Hey, 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 hey. Okay, now to get even more advanced, what a lot of people don't know is that you can blend between false chord and fry screams, and you can also blend between head voice and chest voice. And that allows me to first talk about what Knocked Loose's guitarist Hale is doing.
Push these motherfuckers back. Let's go.
I'll get to Bryan in a moment. So you might need to spend some time to develop your ear a little to hear the nuances, but he is in his chest voice, hey, and he doesn't only do false chords, ha, and also he doesn't only do fries. You can tell that he has both of those qualities in his scream at the same time. He sounds both crunchy, which sounds like his false chords, while also having a wetness and gurgliness in his screams. And he's combining both together and doing what I call a hybrid scream. And it sounds a little like this. Not to mention, even though he's in his chest voice, you don't hear a lot of his voice in it, so he's intentionally making his scream pretty pitchless. So for example, he's not sounding very voicey and sounding like this. Say 1, 2, 3. Instead, he's removing that pitch and sounding more like this. And by the way, this video is more focused on Bryan, but if you want to learn how to combine fry and false chords like how Isaac does it, I've put together some lessons on how to start that you can get for free by checking out the link in the description. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, so now that we know what Isaac is doing, that can allow us to understand how different Bryan's vocals are. So consciously or unconsciously, a lot of people think that fry screaming and false chord screams as being low. This is because most people are used to hearing fry screams in your head voice, and false chord screams in your chest voice. But Bryan does something super uncommon. He actually does a bunch of different variations of screams, all within his head voice register. So first off, many people don't know that it's possible to do false chords in your head voice up here, but he does it. So you can do a head voice false chords in a conventionally crunchy way. For example, And I think he probably does that sometimes, but when I study his live videos, it sounds like he mostly does false chord screams in a looser way, where it gets a different vibrational texture. So instead of sounding like a conventional head voice false chord scream, he sounds more like this. And some other times he also does head voice fry screams over here. So, and then sometimes he blends these different types all together. And one thing that he also does differently compared to Isaac is that Isaac doesn't push his voice through the scream as much, so you can't hear that he's in chest voices, obviously. But Bryan really pushes his head voice through the scream, so you can hear it a lot. So for example, instead of being in his head voice but not being able to hear it like this, you can definitely hear that he's in his head voice. So although Bryan does a lot of things, I want to show you how to do his most unique scream, starting with this. So first off, I want you to identify where your head voice is. So I want you to talk like a baby, and or you could think like Mickey Mouse or Elmo. Hey, 1, 2, 3. By the way, when you're up here, you shouldn't feel vibrations really in your chest. You should kind of almost mildly feel vibrations up here. Ha ha! Yeah! If you feel vibrations down here, or it tends to sound kind of constipated, like you're trying to go off, then that probably means you're in your chest voice. So you gotta be up here. Okay, now when you're in head voice, I want you to try and squawk like a bird. Now this might be kind of silly, but hear me out. Squawk, squawk, squawk. And we want to be somewhat loose in this case. And if it sounds like Elmo, you're on the right track. Squawk, hey! Okay, so assuming you can hit that bird squawking noise, he then drops his jaw and his larynx, aka his Adam's apple, to make the tone less nasal sounding. Squawk! Ray! 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 Say! Ray! Ray! Say! Okay, so now let's talk about you. Everyone, including you, has different vocal habits, speech patterns, accents, levels of soft-spokenness, and fears of damage that affects how you use your voice. You might not have ever used your head voice before, so accessing that part of your range might be super foreign. So as a result, there's no one single approach that works for everyone. So if the approach I gave you doesn't work, that's completely normal. But if you want some other approaches to try and unlock this scream or other screams, then click the link in the description. It'll go over some of the other types of screams he does and prevent this video from being way too big and bulky. Okay, so what does Knocked Loose's vocals teach us? Well, a lot of things. When I was first getting into vocals, I tried to reduce everything to an overly simplified view of things. A younger of me may have simply said, oh, Bryan just does fry screams because he sounds high, and Isaac just does false chord screams because he sounds low. And anyone can scream like him in just 30 seconds. It just takes this one single approach. But that wouldn't capture all the nuance that goes into it. And believe it or not, I think this highlights one of our biggest weaknesses as humans. I know this might sound dramatic, but hear me out. There's this phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect that illustrates this problem. Okay, so here's a graph that demonstrates the relationship between how much knowledge you have in a particular field with how much confidence that you have in the field. And so the interesting thing that happens is that when we first get started and we had known nothing, we're pretty much confused. So that checks out. Now, the interesting thing is that when we tend to know a little bit, that gives us a high amount of confidence that makes us oftentimes think that, oh, like everything is simple. This makes sense. Oh, all fry screams are high. All false chord screams are low. Oh, there's only one way of practicing. Oh, there is a single best way to practice. Oh, just practice. That alone will help. Another example is if you think that all discomfort means that you're hurting your voice. Like all of these thoughts that you're like, okay, these are just definitely golden rules and I should never violate these, and this makes everything else seem so simplified from there, that actually is a trap because that actually prevents you from understanding the nuance of it. And so as you get more and more knowledge, you'll start to realize, hey, there's more to this than I thought. Then you get more and more knowledge, then you're going to be like, oh shit, I might never understand this. And then you keep on going. And then the thing is, as you do this, your confidence will go lower and lower. But then as you keep on going and getting more knowledge, then it will start to sort of like improve a little bit. You might realize like, oh, okay, I think I am now starting to really understand what fry and false chords were. Before I thought I knew, but now I actually know, and now I kind of actually really have the ear for it. And then as you keep on going, then you're like, oh wait, wow, I can actually combine these two, mix vocal registers and stuff like that, and I can kind of blend between this. And then oftentimes like artists themselves are like actually like doing a combination of the two. Oftentimes, if you go to YouTube, you'll find that some people think that they're doing pure false chord screams, but they're actually kind of combining the two, and you'll start to realize just how complex everything can get. So basically, when I was learning vocals, the less I knew, the more I thought things were simple, but the more I knew, the more I realized that reality was far more complicated than it seems. And the reason why this is important is because when I was younger, I used to walk around life with a basic understanding of lots of things. And as a result, it made me carry judgments about life and people. I'd think, that band just got famous because XYZ, or, oh, that band's songs all sound the same. And that judgment stopped me from learning, growing, and connecting with others. But after I learned about this phenomenon, on a micro scale, this has helped me truly appreciate the genius of Bryan and Isaac's vocals and see much more clearly why they are great vocal complements to each other. This has also opened my mind up to new techniques of how to learn vocals and new ways of teaching people. But on a macro scale, knowing about this phenomenon and going on this journey has also taught me to always leave room to know that you might not know everything, and always be a humble student, because there's so much growth that's possible once you realize that. So now you have a better understanding of what Bryan and Isaac are doing. Watch this video to learn more about how to scream like Chester from Linkin Park.